Shanahan is CEO of IDA Ireland, the Inward Investment Promotion Agency. Martin, thanks a million for being with us here at Future Human.
Delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So we're going to talk about the future, of course, but before we do, tell me a little bit about the year that was. It's a very strange time to be attracting FDI into a country, I imagine.
Yes, I mean, it's been a very challenging year for everyone, I think, and for business in general, including FDI. It's obviously made our role in attracting foreign direct investment more challenging. I suppose we first experienced, had sight of the virus back in January, kind of post Chinese New Year. Our Chinese offices didn't open, and that was the first alert on our radar. And I think since then, you know, we've seen obviously the virus spread east-west. It has had an impact on all of our 24 offices across the globe, many of which still remain closed physically, but we obviously are operating virtually, as is everybody else.
And I mean, in a future now where talent is ever more mobile, and that's been kind of accelerated, you know, and potentially remote, what are the challenges for attracting big employers, and do we still need big office blocks, in your view?
Yes, I think we do, I think is the answer. And that certainly is the feedback from our largest clients, that they want their teams back into offices. I don't think we're going back to where we were. I don't think there's any question of that. I think we're going to see a lot more flexibility in the future. We're going to see a lot more variation in the way people work. Obviously, people will work remotely some of the time. I think that's clear. And I suppose the kind of concept of presenteeism, I think, is well and truly dead at this point. But having said that, I think employers do see the value in having employees co-located. That's what we hear. They want that collaboration. They want that innovation. They want to create teams. They want to drive culture. And they also want, I think they're concerned about their employees. And we know that a lot of large tech employers in particular have created their office environments to provide benefits and supports to their employees and around well-being and mental health. And I think all of those reasons, you know, the future of the office is probably well and truly secured, to be honest with you. They may look different. I think there will be countervailing pressures where on the one hand, we will see maybe move away potentially from offices being as open plan as they have been, and we've all gone in that direction. You know, hot desking, all of these things, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and it may be not the last pandemic. And then on the other hand, while there might be fewer people in the offices, maybe more space will be required. And so you'll have countervailing pressures there, which will impact on the look and feel of offices.
And I mean, you know, we both agree there'll be a part move to remote. And I mean, will Ireland still have an edge in that context? And what will that edge be, Martin?
I think absolutely yes is the answer. I think just two things. I think, you know, one is we have seen the install base of foreign direct investment in Ireland performing extraordinarily well during this period. Largely resilient. Obviously, pockets of it have been impacted by the pandemic, the same as everything else. But, you know, technology, pharmaceuticals, medical technologies in particular, you know, have proven really resilient during this period. Obviously, the pipeline of investment more impacted, and it is difficult to get investors' mind share at the moment as they deal with the demands in their own business and the impact of the pandemic, and we can't physically get them to Ireland. But then I think, of course, you know, the fundamentals of attracting foreign direct investment haven't changed in truth. You know, companies, they want talent, they want the availability of talent, they want stability and consistency, and that has moved right up in terms of a criterion for investors. They want the pro-enterprise policies, which a country like Ireland has operated for many years. So for all of those reasons, you know, Ireland will remain attractive. And, you know, but the nature of investment will undoubtedly be impacted. And, you know, every global forecast that I look at, whether it's OECD or UNCTAD, they're all predicting, you know, somewhere in a range of 30 to 45% reduction in global flows of foreign direct investment. So it's going to be a very competitive environment out there. It was already competitive. It's going to be even more competitive.
You know, even talking to some of the other speakers, we've been talking a bit about that move away from, you know, necessarily urban centres and that move to the regions. Is that something that you can see happening, you know, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? Is it a trend
Well,
that you guys see?
I mean, the trend pre-pandemic was very clear. It was towards urban areas. I mean, that has been the global trend in FDI for the last number of years, where increasingly large multinationals move to larger urban areas. And to some extent, IDEA in Ireland have been kind of trying to hold back that wave, and we've been trying to place investments in regional locations with great success. And, you know, we have one international city of scale, which is Dublin, but actually 58% of all foreign direct investment employment in Ireland is outside of Dublin. Will we see more opportunities for remote working and therefore for regional locations? I think yes is the answer. But obviously that works both ways, in that opens up lots of locations that weren't maybe in play before, and they are all locations that Ireland will have to compete with. So we compete on a world stage. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, we've competed pretty well up to now. I mean, we've most of the major tech companies here in some form or another, and many of them in a very large form. Is there a move now that we've kind of succeeded there? Is there a move towards kind of more emerging high growth companies that you guys are trying to attract into Ireland? Is that changing?
Well, actually, we've been at that for quite some time, and I suppose while people may look at the very large players and think of them as large, they weren't large when we attracted them here. I think that's an important point. I mean, if you think about Apple was not the behemoth in 1980 that it is now. When we brought it to Hollyhill in Cork, it had 60 employees involved in manufacturing. It is now has every function that Apple has globally, based there with over, or, you know, around 6,000 employees. Similarly, you know, more recent example, LinkedIn started in 2010 in Dublin with 6 employees, you know, and has grown again at scale. So at the point they're coming in, a lot of these companies are small, but we've had a very specific targeted initiative, which we refer to them as emerging companies, over the last number of years, where we're targeting companies that are making their first internationalization step. So they've grown in their home market, wherever that is, they're internationally for the first time, and getting them at that point before they get too large. That's a key part of our strategy, has been a key part of our strategy. They're coming out of west coast of the US, out of Boston, Cambridge, but other locations as well. Technology has been a large part of that, but not just technology, pharma, med tech, all of those others as well.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose finally, on kind of on the leadership side, I mean, you've been leading a fairly large organization through a pandemic. Do you have tips for other leaders? I mean, no matter what sector they're in, on that experience, have you learnings or tips from it?
I'm not sure we would ever set ourselves out as an exemplar, and certainly not from a leadership perspective. But listen, I think, you know, what does one need at this time? I think first, humility. There is no handbook for this. Nobody has all of the answers, and I'm always, you know, keen to point that out. I think secondly, high degree of empathy. We need to understand how people are experiencing this, and how they're going through this pandemic, and what the impacts are for them. And then I think, from my perspective, you know, the tip is probably communications. You know, communications with your team, communication with your client or customers, communication with your shareholders. In our case, that is the government, so that everybody knows where you're at, what you're doing, what you're trying to do, where you're going to. That's key from my perspective.
That's pretty good advice, I think, Martin. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us. It was really great to get an update on what's going on in IDA Ireland, and to hear a little bit from yourself. So thanks a million, Martin.
Thank you, Anne.